The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host.
On this episode of Mule Talk, we have back our author, TV personality, and world-renowned mule trainer, Meredith Hodges of the Lucky 3 Ranch. Meredith, thanks for coming back on.
My pleasure, Cindy. We always have a lot of fun here.
You bet. And today we're going to be talking about myths about desensitization. I read your article on it. It is awesome. So I would like for you to share with our listeners what you have found out to be true. So take it away.
All righty. Well, when I got started with mules, the biggest thing that was going on was sacking them out. And that's what my mom did at her ranch, too. She had a trainer there, and that's how he started the mules. He tied them up in the corner of his stall and went in there with a great big tarp and started flapping it around, and the animals are crawling up the walls and couldn't stand still, and he just kept at it until they did. And they would even, they'd just stand there and shake. And I thought, well, now how is this going to make an animal suitable for riding, one that you know you can trust and somebody who's going to be reliable, if they're just afraid of you? And then he didn't stop with the tarp. He got out everything. He got out bells. He got out chains. He got out everything he could to spook the animal. And I thought, well, this just can't be a good thing. Now, Webster's dictionary gives you the definition of the word desensitized, and it's to make a sensitized or hypersensitive individual insensitive or non-reactive to a sensitizing agent. That just means you make them a deadhead.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, with a live animal, that doesn't mean that they are going to behave that way all the time. They're a living, breathing entity. The other thing I heard about these guys doing is putting them on the ground and covering up with a tarp until they just broke them, until they were so afraid that they were afraid to do anything with these guys. Well, it just so happened all these guys were big guys. They could handle these animals if they got a little, little bulky or whatever. They could kind of brutalize them a little bit and still have a hold of them, and they couldn't get away from them or anything, but give them to somebody else. That wasn't necessarily the case. And so, some people have this misconception that in order to desensitize an animal, you have to make it numb to the surroundings and any stimulus that they run into, but this isn't true. And I believe what you want to do is exactly the opposite. You want to sensitize your animal to different body language and cues from you as the trainer. So desensitization doesn't mean achieving a total lack of sensitivity. Rather, it should be approached as a way of training your equine in a way that's quiet and calm, to be less sensitive to certain objects or events that may be going on around him to cause him to be fearful, so he can move forward with confidence and the right kind of sensitivity towards the communication between the two of you. And that happens when you just move slowly. When incorrect, harsh, overly aggressive desensitizing techniques are used on equines, the handler is met with either a very strong flight reflex or a stand-and-fight reflex. In either case, the animal will either put up a fight or become, kind of rogue and unmanageable. And sometimes they do give up, but more often they don't. And then you get surprises when you're out there and you finally reach the point where you're riding, because most people want to ride. That's the thing they want to do. So they don't want to go through and do all of the detailed training in steps that I talk about. I always start with the hourglass pattern and simple leading training to connect us and everything like that. Also, that's at the same time I'm building their core strength, and with building that core strength comes comfort in the animal's body, and they recognize you as the person who's making them comfortable.
Right.
So they will learn to trust you.
Sure.
And so that's something that's completely 180 degrees different from this kind of desensitization that people do, because that actually causes them to fear you. And you want him to be resigned to his work, and he's not going to want to work, and he's not going to want to go with you if he knows that you're going to come at him with all these different things.
Right.
Now, as I went forward, I recognized that it was doubly important to sensitize my driving animals. Driving is a whole different ball of wax, and boy, if they had come unglued while they're hitched up, that was the only time I actually got hurt, was when I hitched a 2-year-old up to a metal cart in my indoor arena. And at that point in time, I didn't even wear a helmet. Dumb old me. I should have known better, but
Wow.
I didn't at that point.
Yeah.
And she just bolted, and hitching up a 2-year-old. I mean, what was I thinking? But you begin all these things in training until you learn different.
And you get
so
excited about what you're doing, so I can relate. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and most people do, and we don't learn things till things happen,
Right.
and that's what happened. This mule bolted with the cart, and she just dumped me out. When I fell, the cart tipped over. I went flying out of the cart and hit my head on a post. The odd thing was, though, that when that happened, my husband said he ran to me, and I was unconscious, and the mule was still running around the arena, but he says, I woke up, and I stopped the mule, and I unharnessed her, and I went and took her to her stall and put her in and then passed out again.
Wow.
I guess they are absolutely number one in my mind,
You
whether
bet.
I'm all
You
there
bet.
or not, I mean, that's
Sure.
what I do. I take care of my mules. And so, but I was out for a whole day in the hospital. And so that was pretty serious. But that incident taught me that maybe I should take a little more time with what I'm doing and do this in small steps. And so my approach to desensitization was really modified. I did think that my driving animals needed to be exposed to a lot of different things, because more likely than not, they're going to end up in a parade. And all the different things that can go on in a parade.
Oh, sure.
So I would take them into the round pen and put their harness on and everything with the blinders. I want everything there that they're going to be in. Sometimes you can drive them without blinders. That's fine. But see, in training, you want to train with blinders on, because when you're doing a parade or something like that, things come out of left field. So you don't want to open up that whole field of vision, because on one hand, it gives them a big warning that something is coming, and then their responses are bigger. But if they've got the blinders on, and they're used to being driven in the blinders, then they can kind of focus. It kind of helps them focus, and they don't concern themselves with a larger area. So that's really what blinders are for. And so when I desensitized my animals in the round pen, I tied them up in there with the blinders on and everything, and then I introduced things to them slowly. And I always came from the front first. So I came from where they could see, and then moved around them and rubbed the tarp up and down their neck and around their ears, when it was the tarp, and just got them, used to it. And then the last thing I would do is go over the tail, down the legs, underneath the belly and everything, and then through the front legs up and over the front, and then came right up in front of their nose. So they saw that what I started with is the same thing that covered their whole body. So logically speaking, I was not abusing them in any way. They did shake sometimes, and when they did, I just slowed down what I was doing, backed up a little bit, and did it again in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was just responding to the body language that they were giving me. I did it with bells. I did it with leather straps. I did it with PVC poles and all different things. But I always approached it the same way. And then for an abrupt introduction, I picked up a cat and threw it on the back of the animal. But I let them see the cat first, and the kitty jumped up and the kitty jumped down, and they knew the kitties because the kitties were always there anyway, and they like to stomp them.
Oh.
But in this case, they really couldn't.
Okay.
So they even got introduced to the cats, and with the idea that no, you don't flatten cats.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah, so you really have to, teach them some manners around these smaller animals too, if you don't want them to chase them. And that's one way to do it, and then on the converse of that, I had to teach cats, no, it's not a good idea to go in the pens where the mules are. So when they would start sneaking in there, I'd chase them out of there. I'd do what the mules were going to do, So I would just kind of believe in teaching animals the realities of the situation. Because what I've learned about mules is they need to see a purpose in what you're doing. And when these people will go ahead and they go, oh, yeah, my animal's afraid of this. And so they'll put it in their stall or their run and make them live with it. And I think the mules just look at you and go, God, what is she going to come up with next? This person is just trying to intimidate me, and I don't like it. Now, if it was you wouldn't like it either.
Right.
If somebody turned up the radio in your bedroom and made you leave it on and locked you in there, what would you think? I think I'll go find another bedroom,
Right on.
So, I did realize that we were really harassing these animals with these approaches that we do. He wouldn't load in the trailer, so a lot of people would go ahead and put the trailers in the pens with the animals and feed them in there. Well, that's not what you do with a trailer. If you go with a trailer, you're going to take them somewhere. So they have to be comfortable with that. And so the trailer training needs to go down just the way you do it. You put the halter on, you lead them, and you lead them exactly the way I outlined for the hourglass pattern. And you lead them that way from the time you take them out of their pen till the time you put them back. But the pen and the stall should be their place of relaxation where they know undeniably that nothing is going to harass them there.
Right,
that
right.
They're safe.
Uh-huh.
That they can let down, and if they've got, stable mates there with them, that they're all safe and they can all do what they want. And you even made it safe when you put the feed down 16 feet apart when you've got multiple animals in there. That you're trying to keep that calm going on when they're not working. And when they are working, it's always going to be prefaced with an introduction, a polite introduction, and not something just coming out of nowhere and getting up in their face. And if you think of things in terms of how would I like it if somebody did that to me, then you can usually come to the right answer on how to approach these things. And you might actually want to slow down because it's actually much more rewarding to slow down and get the approval of your animal and the affection that he has to give to you. And most often, he'll just put his head around your shoulder and give you a head hug. I've had a lot of those, and those are a thank you from your mule. He's just going, oh, thank you. This is so nice. This doesn't have to be hard, does it? Oh, I was acting like an idiot before, wasn't I? And then you do the same thing. If you do something wrong, you go and hug them, and you go, oh, gee, I'm sorry. I was acting like an idiot before, And then you both come to a mutual, relationship of love, affection, and trust. That's the most important thing. And so, your animal will learn to willingly comply. And what you have actually done by taking these extra steps and spending this extra time, and I mean, it's a lot of extra time. Groundwork, I take usually 3 to 6 months, depending on the experience of the animal, beforehand, if it's a rescue, on just leading in the hourglass pattern, flat work. Then adding the obstacles, it's another 3 to 6 months. When they're physically able to start their lessons in the round pen in good posture, then that's another 3 to 6 months. Then it's another 3 to 6 months ground driving, first in the round pen and then in the open area. And I don't even think about getting on and doing anything under saddle until, they've done this 2 years of groundwork. And you will find that there's a lot of little victories that you will have, and a lot of things happen in that 2 years that will make the riding that much more solid. I thought that I had, 12 animals when I was doing all those documentaries and training videos and being on TV and all of those things. I didn't have a lot of time, and I had 32 animals. And I had about 10 of them that I managed to get the groundwork in on. The hourglass, the obstacles, the round pen, the open area, ground driving, and all of that. And I finally one day woke up in the morning and went, these guys are like 10 and 12 years old. Maybe I should get on them. Maybe we better get to that, before they get too much older. And I was just amazed.
Really?
I got on those guys, and not one of them bucked, ran, or did anything wrong at all.
Wow.
They were light in the bridle, and the only thing they had to learn was to move away from the pressure from my legs. And that was a cinch, because I'd already used, the crop on their sides to make them do the side passing on the lead rope first, then on the drive lines, and now under saddle. So what you've done is you've taught them everything that they're going to be doing in those stages. And at the same time, you've been moving in sync with their legs and everything. So your body has become in sync with their body language, and you both understand each other. So when you get on, it's no big deal. They go, oh, now Mom's on top of me instead of behind me or in front or whatever. She's moved around a lot.
It's her again.
Thing, And from being in the hourglass pattern, there's no bolting, there's no bucking, there's no running off or anything like that, because in all of those different places, you have taught them how to stand still and wait for what you ask them to do next, because you're not abruptly asking, out of the blue. Nothing comes out of the blue when you slow down like this. Everything is very deliberate, very predictable, and causes them to be very calm and confident in what they do, and there's no need for any avoidance behaviors.
Okay.
And the main avoidance behavior trigger that I have found is when things come out of nowhere, and then they get startled, and then all of a sudden they're off balance.
Yeah.
And when you don't develop that core strength, then what happens? They're off balance. Then they get defensive. Then they employ those reflexes. But when you've gone through all of this stuff and they get startled, they startle and they stand four square and wait for you to tell them what to do next.
Yeah.
And a perfect example of this was with one of my mare mules. I go riding in the mountains all the time, and so, with Cooper arguments, I have tested Coopers up and down hills and jumping into canyons and jumping out and over water, through water and everything like that, And I've come to realize that if the tack fits right and everything's not moving, and and that's moving with the animal, and the animal has the ability to be in good posture 99% of the time, and the 1% is not, is when I've interfered, of course. But I took some riders up into the mountains, and these riders, there were I think it was 4 riders on horses. Well, horses, they can kind of get skittish sometimes if they're spooked and have overreactions to everything.
Yeah.
And I was leading this bunch, and we were going up this road, and it just kept getting narrower. The higher up we went, the narrower the road got, until it was really just about a 5-foot wide trail. And it came up on this great big boulder. We were riding on the side of a hill, and it was 100 feet straight down off the edge, and it was 100 feet up, straight up on the other side. And came to this boulder, and it looked like it was laying right in the road. And I told the horses, just stay back for a minute where the wide spot in the road was. And I rode forward, and I noticed that the trail narrowed, because what had happened is this huge, and I mean huge, boulder, must have been 8 foot in diameter or so, had rolled down the hill and blocked the road. But there was a trail that went around it, and I couldn't see the other side, and I wondered what was on the other side, if this road took up on the other side of it, if we could actually get around this. The only problem was that trail was only about 3 feet wide around the boulder, and looked like it was kind of crumbling rock on the side of it, and then just the boulder on the other side of it, kind of narrow. And I didn't think that would be a good idea to take horses around there, but we might be able to make it if the horses would just stay calm long enough to get around that boulder. So I rode around the boulder, and when I got to the other side, it was a complete wash of the whole side of the mountain, and the trail just ended.
Ooh.
So here I'm sitting there on my mule, and I had just come around like about a horseshoe around this boulder on a 3-foot trail that went straight down 100 feet, and then the boulder was on the other side of me. And I thought, oh my God, my mule just stopped, squared up, turned around and looked at me and just went, okay, smarty pants, what do we do now?
Don't you hate those moments?
I just love these moments.
Yeah, really.
Well, I had to sit there and think about it for a minute, and I thought, well, I've taught her how to sit back on her haunches and do these spins and slides in reining, and that might actually work. She's strong enough to hold all her weight on her hindquarters, because she's done it. So I just said, okay, B, let's just do a 180 right here where we are.
Ooh.
And you just sweep those front legs right over that 100-foot drop and stay on your haunches. And she did that. She sat back, got on her pivot foot, and just turned around right where she was, and then stopped.
Wow.
And she goes, was that right? I said, that was perfect. Now we are pointed the other way, and we can go back, walk back, going forward, and tell those riders there is no way their horses are coming this direction. And that's what we did.
Awesome.
But had she not been taught to wait and, stopped at every interval during her 2 years of training on the ground, and then later under saddle like that. Actually, by the time I got done with that, it was 3 years.
Oh,
but
okay.
she always learned to wait. She always learned to do what I asked her to do, stop, 4 square, and wait. And then proceed the way I asked to do. And I have found no other way to do this but to spend that time, going slowly, breaking things down into certain steps and having conversations with my animals. It does not do any good at all when they're edgy about something.
Sure.
If they don't trust you and you don't listen to what they're trying to tell you, then they're not going to believe you. If you go trying to force anything, if you want to go across a bridge that they think is not safe, then you have to convince them that it is. And I can't tell you how many times I walked out in front and my foot has gone through a bridge, and I have to turn around and go, oh, yeah, you were right. I'm sorry. We're not going this way.
Yeah.
I have walked into creeks where it looked absolutely fine.
Sure.
And it didn't look deep. And I start wading through the creek and I hit a hole and I'm up to my waist. And I'm going, well, you were right about this.
Yeah.
So I've learned to trust them, and my animals have taught me that they can also be trusted, and we need to have conversations before we go and do something that they deem more dangerous.
Very well said.
But, yeah, so and it's no big deal to spend a little bit extra time with them like that, because it sure pays off in the end. And then you don't have vet bills with them.
Right.
You don't have, which keeps things cheaper and, in the all in all there, So, it also makes, doing all these moves a whole lot easier when you take your time. People will get out there. The most often I hear is, when they're trying to sell a mule or something, they go, oh, yeah, and this mule already side passes. And I'm just like, oh, brother. Yeah, he may go sideways. They all do. And that they're really good at avoidance behaviors. But if you watch them, they're not doing it in very good posture, and they're not doing it the right way. And a lot of times they hurt themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They'll pull ligaments, tendons, muscles, and stuff like that. And that escalates their problems when they get older. That's how they develop arthritis, is from doing things wrong. A lot of people will see, you hear about mules being lame out of nowhere, and people can't figure out how that happened, Oh, it must be the saddle. Oh, it must be this. It must be that. But no, it's not really that. It's happening inside their bodies because they're not moving correctly.
Right.
Most animals...
Mm-hmm.
They're bulk muscle bound, but they're not agile and strong in their core. So, it's like we ask these guys to do things that, like even football players have to do exercises to prepare for the game because they don't use all those muscles in the game. And if they don't do exercises that prepare the whole body, then they run the risk of really hurting themselves. And they still do that anyway. But it's kind of like if you decide, oh, I'm going to go on a 25-mile hike with a 50-pound pack on my back. And, I can do this. And you go out there and you do it. And you say, see, I did this, but nobody sees you the next morning when you can't get off the couch.
Right.
and that's not good. The other thing is how easy is it to get a crook in your neck just turning it the wrong way? These things that go on when these guys are exhibiting lameness, 9 times out of 10, we don't know where it came from, but it probably is a core problem. It's probably because they're weak in the core and they just made a wrong move the wrong way at the wrong time.
Wow. Sure. Now, what about you have a mule where it's been riding for several years, but this particular mule was not exposed to extensive ground training like the hourglass moves, and etc.
Core muscles are still going to be weak, and they're going to have been developed asymmetrically.
Okay, so at that point, can you add the core strength exercises and have it still do good for the animal that has been riding under saddle?
Yes, it can, but you can't expect it to fix all the things that that it's already developed.
Right.
Like it could have mild ring bone, it could have mild side bones, it could have wearing in the cartilage in the joints, and there might be arthritis starting in there.
Sure.
The thing that will make it better if you just drop everything, first of all, you have to stop riding. You have to go right to the leading training, and you cannot ride again until you've gone through all of that groundwork to develop that core so that the animal is now traveling symmetrically through his body, in his joints, in his skeleton, and just reinforcing that until it's his natural way of moving.
Okay.
And you can test that at every stage, at the leading stage, by just throwing that lead rope over his neck. Even the drive lines, you can stand behind him and throw the drive lines up on his neck or up on his butt and stand behind him, tell him, walk in sync with his back legs, just like you did with the front legs. And he will pay attention to you, and he will do what you want. And you can even get them to back into you without pulling on the lines or anything, because they're responding to the verbal commands and the body language. And when that's consistent, and it's been taught with the right kind of movement, then their whole body gets strong underneath, right next to the skeleton that way. And you've put all that together and nothing has changed. You've taught a new way of moving, one that they recognize, and there isn't anything they won't do. They'll back right into you if you ask them to.
Okay, very good.
But those things, the things that were wrong with them from doing all that work, depending on how long, are still going to be there.
Right.
It's going to be just like rock and roll. And if you want to see, what I'm talking about, you can go and get that movie Rock and Roll Diary of a Rescue.
Mm-hmm.
And I explain all this in that video, and you can watch it on demand or you can buy your own copy. But it explains all of these kinds of things, because rock and roll were worst case scenario. They were headed for the slaughterhouse, and legitimately so. I mean, but I wanted to see just how far my exercises and what I was saying would really go on animals that were absolutely damaged to the max. And that was the validation of my entire program. And we took x-rays and everything, and my veterinarian at certain periods of time, and we were monitoring the side bones, the ring bone, the supposedly fractured pelvis, and everything that Rock had. Rock also had teeth removed because they were abscessed, and we had to check on the bones in his face and his neck and all of these things and see, what was changing. We even found there's a thing called kissing spine, where there's calcification in the spinous processes, the little fingers that stick up out of the vertebrae across their back.
Right.
And we noticed that where it was really thick, where the calcium was really thick, it kind of moved, but not very much. But where it was thinner, it had actually broken loose and spread those spinous processes again, which made it better, because now he's, the spinous process, this kissing spine is caused by them raising their head and, compressing those fingers, if you will, together, and they rub, and then the calcium is, just comes in right between them, and then it gets solid, and then they get arthritis, and then they're not as flexible or anything. But if it's not real bad, it can actually improve that. If it is bad in certain places, the places where they were hitting before to aggravate it will not be hitting like that anymore when they're in good balance, so it doesn't make it any worse. And so in the case of Rock, what happened in his right hip, it was completely shattered. I've never seen anything like it. And Colorado State University said that they thought that team had to have been hit by a dump truck to do that much damage to Rock. I think Roll was on the other side, so he didn't have the same kind of damage. But also the way they were moving was out of good posture, so it was constantly aggravated. And so Rock lasted for a year, and we did a whole year and got him at the walk, sound at the walk, in good posture. But when he went to trot, too much pressure, and then it just came out again, you could see how off he was.
Oh, yeah.
But Rock still had a whole year, and out of 365 days, he was only on medication, Bute, for 5 days when he got laminitis at one point.
Wow.
And the rest of the time, he was completely drug-free. So all this exercise and the diet and everything was all that there was to heal him to the point that he got healed, which was amazing. And then Roll, he went on for another 9 years, and I even rode him. I rode him at the walk and trot, and then decided not to put any more pressure on him by asking him to canter, because I knew that if he did, he'd get all discombobulated again and out of good posture. So I only rode him at the walk and trot, which is what he was schooled at.
Okay.
He got a couple of rounds in the round pen at canter, but it was an indication to me that if I added more weight to him, that's what he was going to do out in the open too. Even with the development of the good posture at walk and trot, it would just come apart at the canter.
Sure.
So I never did it. Just decided that would not be a very smart move.
Wow.
But yeah, that's a really good video that will show you everything that I'm talking about here, and what drastic changes it can make. Not only, your relationship with the animal, but just in his body and his way of going. And even when he's resting, you'll see that he's always resting four square, because that's the most comfortable place to be within his body. When he's putting more weight on some feet and less weight on others, that should tell you that he's out of balance and something hurts.
Oh, right. Well, Meredith, this has been really good to hear all of this and the work that you do. You have a website, and that is?
It is www.lucky3ranch, all spelled out, not the number 3.com. And we have a second website for kids and immature adults. No.
That's my category.
We all love to be children sometimes. So jasperthemule.com is our more kid-friendly website. The phone is 800-816-7566. And I also have a Facebook page. I've got two, but my friend's page is maxed out. But I put the same thing in both places. Is at Meredith Hodges publicfigure.com, MEREDITH. And if you want to get a hold of me, you're welcome to write to me at meredith@lucky3ranch.com. And I always promptly answer any questions that people write to me right away.
Well, Meredith, thanks again. You've been awesome. We will, of course, have you back on, and we will talk soon.
Sounds great. Stay warm.
You bet.
If you'd like to be a guest on the show or a sponsor, send me an email.
everycowgirlsdream@gmail.com.
Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.
Mule Talk is an Every Cowgirl's Dream production.